Okay, let's get into one of the really weird ones today. Maybe one of the most persistent legends from World War II, the Philadelphia experiment.
Ah, yes. A story that just keeps bubbling up. It's got everything, hasn't it? Secret tech, vanishing ships.
Totally. So picture it. It's 1943, the war is raging, and the U.S. Navy is desperate for any advantage. Radar's a big deal, finding the enemy.
But what if you could go beyond just finding them? What if you could make your own ships? Well, undetectable.
Exactly. And that's where the urgency comes in. The pressure for wartime innovation was immense.
And radar was the cutting edge then. So the idea of somehow leapfrogging that, achieving actual, maybe even visual invisibility, that's a powerful motivator. Hugely ambitious, of course.
Right. And this legend, it really goes beyond just, dodging radar. The claim is about cloaking a whole ship, maybe messing with space, maybe even time itself.
And the ship at the heart of it all is the USS Eldridge.
A brand new destroyer escort apparently docked right there in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard.
Which becomes the setting for this supposed secret research. And you hear these names bandied about. Nikola Tesla, even Einstein.
Yeah, linking it to Tesla's work on electromagnetism, which was, pretty wild stuff for the time, and Einstein's unified field theory.
Well, Einstein was still working on that theory, trying to connect all the forces.
Yeah.
And Tesla's ideas were definitely out there.
So applying those very theoretical ideas to a warship, it's a stretch, a big one.
A monumental stretch.
Hmm.
But in that atmosphere of wartime necessity and scientific frontiers, maybe the speculation isn't that surprising.
So the legend goes like this. They fire up these powerful electromagnetic generators on the Eldridge.
And then things get cinematic.
Right. They talk about this weird green fog rolling in.
And a humming sound. Very specific sensory details.
Yeah, those details really stick, don't they? Makes it feel more real, maybe.
Or at least more memorable. Adds to that sense of something truly strange happening.
And then the ship just disappears, vanishes, poof.
Gone from Philadelphia. But that's not even the weirdest part.
No, because the story continues. The Eldridge supposedly reappears, like instantly, hundreds of miles south in Norfolk, Virginia.
Seen by sailors there, according to the legend.
And then just as quickly, it vanishes again from Norfolk.
And reappears back in Philadelphia.
All within, minutes? An impossibly short time for that distance.
Which points to something far beyond simple invisibility. We're talking teleportation.
Accidental or not, yeah. Moving through space instantly.
And that's the really extraordinary claim, isn't it? If something like that happened, even by accident, the implications are staggering. How could you possibly keep that quiet?
Which leads directly to the alleged aftermath. And this is where it gets really dark, really disturbing.
The stories about the crew.
Horrific accounts. Men sick, confused, some supposedly driven mad.
And worse. Much worse.
Some accounts say sailors were found fused, like physically embedded into the steel bulkheads of the ship.
It's a horrifying image. Others just vanish completely, never seen again.
And some apparently kept phasing, flickering in and out of visibility after the event, like they were unstuck in time or something.
These claims of human cost add this layer of tragedy and, well, it fuels the idea of a cover-up, doesn't it? If the tech had that kind of effect.
You definitely want to bury it. So yeah, accidental teleportation, time displacement. These are the explanations often thrown around for these awful effects.
So that's the legend in its full dramatic form. A vanished ship, teleportation, horrific consequences.
Our mission for this deep dive then is to try and unpack this. Where did it come from? Why does it stick around?
Yeah, let's dig into the origins, the claims, the denials, and just see where it leads. It's a fascinating mix of history, rumor, and maybe some science fiction.
Okay, so where does this wild story actually start? It seems like the main source, the spark, comes later in 1955.
Right, years after the supposed event. It originates with these letters.
Letters from a guy named Carl Meredith Allen. He also used the name Carlos Ande.
And who did he send them to?
To Morris K. Jessup. He was an astronomer, but he'd written a book about UFOs, The Case for the UFO.
Okay, so Jessup was already interested in unconventional stuff. The 1950s, peak UFO era, Cold War paranoia, fertile ground.
Totally. And Allen, or Allend, he writes to Jessup claiming he saw it happen, said he was on a nearby merchant ship, the SS Andrew Furuseth.
An eyewitness, supposedly.
Yeah, claims he saw the Eldridge engulfed in the green fog and then just disappear. And he included all these details about the terrible effects on the crew later.
So Jessup gets these letters, filled with annotations and strange details, presumably connecting to his UFO theories about advanced propulsion or something.
He must have found them pretty compelling, or at least intriguing. But then things take another strange turn. Jessup dies in 1959.
Under mysterious circumstances, as the story often goes.
Officially, it was ruled a suicide. But, given his involvement with these weird letters and UFOs.
It inevitably fed the conspiracy narrative, the idea that maybe he got too close to some hidden truth about the experiment or about UFOs and was silenced.
Right. Whether true or not, his death definitely added fuel to the fire for those already inclined to believe in a cover-up. It's a classic trope in these kinds of stories.
The silenced investigator.
And from that point, the Philadelphia experiment legend really starts to spread. It moves beyond just niche UFO circles.
It starts showing up in books, articles, documentaries.
And then the big one, the 1984 movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, that probably blasted it into mainstream consciousness for a whole new generation.
Pop culture is huge for keeping these things alive, isn't it? Even if the movie takes massive liberties, it cements the core idea in people's minds.
Okay, but what about the official side, the people who would actually know, like the U.S. Navy?
Unsurprisingly, a flat denial. Consistent and total denial that any such experiment ever took place.
They point to the ship's logs, right? The USS Eldridge's actual records from 1943.
Exactly. And according to the official logs and naval historians who've looked into it, the Eldridge wasn't even in Philadelphia during the supposed time frame of the main event in October 1943. It was apparently on sea trials in the Bahamas around then.
So, completely different location.
Completely different. The logs document its movements, commissioning, shakedown cruises, all seemingly normal naval operations for a new ship. No mention of vanishing acts.
So, what was happening in Philadelphia or with ships like the Eldridge that could possibly be misinterpreted? The Navy has an explanation for that, too.
They talk about degaussing.
Degaussing. Okay, what is that exactly?
It's a real process.
Right.
Standard procedure during WWII, actually. Ships were wrapped in cables carrying strong electrical currents.
Why?
To reduce the ship's magnetic signature, make it less vulnerable to magnetic mines or torpedoes, which were a serious threat.
Ah, okay. So it involves powerful electromagnetic fields around the ship.
Precisely. And the Navy suggests that maybe someone unfamiliar with this process saw the cables, maybe witnessed some strange electrical effects, perhaps corona discharge or St. Elmo's fire around the equipment.
And their imagination ran wild. Or the story got exaggerated over time.
That's the plausible, evidence-based alternative they offer. Degaussing is real science, used routinely. Teleportation, not so much.
So we have the official denial, the ship's logs placing it elsewhere, a plausible explanation involving degaussing. Yet the story persists. Why? Why does this particular tale have such staying power?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think there are a few layers to it.
Like what?
Well, psychologically, there's definitely an appeal. The idea of secret knowledge, governments hiding incredible, maybe dangerous technology.
Especially wartime secrets, it taps into that anxiety about unchecked science and hidden power.
Absolutely. And then there's just the sheer allure of the mystery itself. Humans are drawn to the unexplained, aren't we? We want there to be things beyond our current understanding.
True. A good mystery is hard to resist.
And this one has all the elements. High stakes, weird phenomena, alleged tragedy, potential cover-up.
Then you've got the original source, Carlos Allende. What about him?
Well, subsequent investigations and accounts haven't exactly painted him as the most reliable narrator.
Right. I've read reports suggesting he had a reputation for, let's say, embellishment or fabrication, maybe a history of mental health issues.
So the theory that the whole thing might have been a hoax, or at least a wildly exaggerated account based on maybe seeing something mundane like degaussing, is pretty strong.
But his letters, questionable or not, were the catalyst. It speaks to the power of a compelling story, doesn't it? Even if the source is shaky.
It really does. A narrative that taps into existing anxieties or beliefs can take on a life of its own, regardless of factual basis.
And of course, for the true believers, Allen's alleged instability or the Navy's denials are just
part of the cover-up. Disinformation to discredit the witness and hide the terrible truth.
It creates this kind of closed loop where any evidence against the story is twisted to become evidence for the conspiracy behind it.
That's very typical of how conspiracy theories function. They become self-sealing, very difficult to debunk from the outside, because skepticism is interpreted as proof.
And the legend hasn't stayed static either, has it? It seems to have grown, merged with other stories over time.
Yeah, it's evolved. You see connections being made to things like Project Rainbow, which was supposedly the code name for the actual invisibility project the Philadelphia experiment was part of.
Even though official records link Rainbow to things like radar development.
Right. And then later, it gets tied into the whole Montauk Project mythology, even wilder claims about mind control, time travel, portals.
It's like these different fringe narratives kind of feed into each other, creating this larger interconnected web of conspiracy.
They borrow elements, reinforce each other. It shows how adaptable these legends are.
Let's touch on the science for a second. Is any of this even remotely possible based on physics as we understand it?
Well, manipulating electromagnetic fields. Absolutely. That's basic physics.
And the cloaking idea.
Scientists are working on invisibility cloaks, but using things called metamaterials. These can bend light or other electromagnetic waves like radar around an object.
But that's mostly small scale, right? And often just for specific frequencies of light or radar.
Exactly. Tiny objects, specific wavelengths, making a massive steel warship visually disappear using electromagnetic fields. That's way beyond anything we can currently do or even model realistically.
And the teleportation aspect, the unified field theory.
That's even more speculative. If we ever achieved a complete unified field theory, linking gravity and electromagnetism in the way Einstein hoped, who knows what might be possible? Maybe manipulating space-time.
A big if.
A huge if. We don't have that theory. And even if we did, translating it into technology capable of teleporting a destroyer. We're firmly in science fiction territory there. There's no known physics that allows for that.
So the specific claims vanishing, teleporting a whole ship seems scientifically implausible based on current knowledge.
Highly implausible, yes. The gap between known science and the alleged events is immense.
But maybe the point isn't really whether it could happen scientifically.
Maybe it's more about why we're so fascinated by the idea that it could have happened.
Yeah. What does it say about us? That deep need to explain things we don't understand. That hunger for mystery.
And that suspicion of authority, especially when it comes to powerful technology and secrets. The story resonates on that human level, regardless of the facts.
It touches on fundamental curiosity, maybe a bit of fear, a desire for something more beyond the mundane.
Exactly. The legend persists, I think, less because people believe the physics and more because it speaks to those deeper human impulses.
So, as you've been listening to this, what really jumps out at you is it the sheer boldness of the claims, the green fog and the humming.
Or maybe the tragic human element, the stories of the crew. That part always feels particularly potent.
Or maybe you're just thinking about that fuzzy line between what science can do, what it might do someday, and what's pure imagination.
It definitely makes you ponder that boundary.
The Philadelphia experiment, fact or fiction, certainly gives us a lot to chew on. And maybe the most interesting question isn't, did it happen?
But why do we keep telling this story?
Yeah. What does our collective fascination with this vanishing ship, this alleged scientific horror story, really tell us about ourselves? Something to think about.